There's no doubt that the U.S. economy is in hot water. As more Americans feel the hit on their wallets, they begin to open their eyes to the situation. What is happening before our very eyes is so devastating that I find it difficult to put a name to it. This is beyond the financial crisis we've experienced in the past. Even if I refer to what is happening as an economic collapse, it still doesn't completely describe it. Skyrocketing gas prices across the country, record-breaking lumber prices, and more. All are warning signs of a major inflationary scourge, perhaps historic hyperinflation that will come upon us. One of the places we will see the results of this toxic economic inflation will be the supermarkets. High food prices, which will soon increase even more, will bring palpable shocks to unprepared Americans. Besides all this, another danger I see is a nation that has become almost addicted to stimulus checks. It's very scary. As I said, this is all happening before our very eyes, so please take it seriously, folks. Take it very seriously. What we're seeing is just the beginning. The deep cracks in the U.S. economy, which I will explain in today's financial argument video, are just the beginning and are already starting to change many American people's living standards. Let's take a look at the painful truths. When we look at this table, according to the largest data, we can see that average credit card interest rate is 16.13%. Well, if the inflation in the U.S. was 1 to 2%, as stated in the official figures, why do they need to charge this much interest? They know there will be a decrease in purchasing power for the money they are repaid due to inflation, so they want to compensate for that with high interest. Either way, they're lying to us about inflation, or the government is letting the banks rob us. To me, both are valid. This simple table alone tells us so much. It indicates that the real rate of inflation in America is at least 10% or more, and it gives us a chance to expose an economic lie. If an economy is lying about inflation, that means the entire system is based on lies. So we have to ask the question, what is the real inflation rate in America? This question is important because, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're at the very beginning of the great economic disaster that I have difficulty naming. We need to understand how bad the current economic situation is. Then we can better understand the financial catastrophe heading our way. Let's take a look at this graph from shadowstats.com, which is a great resource on this subject. In the 1980s, inflation in America was high enough to exceed 15%. To fix this, they applied very high interest rates, and most importantly, they changed the way inflation is calculated. After this calculation method change, they officially announced that the inflation rate had become a very low figure. ShadowStats still continues to calculate this with the no lies method. Can you see the huge gap between the two figures? In this case, the real inflation in America is at a minimum 10% at the moment. There is no doubt that this rate is higher when you go to local supermarkets. Let's look at the annual GDP growth according to America's real inflation data. I don't know if you noticed it, but the United States economy actually hasn't grown since the 2000 crisis. So who believes that the stock markets are breaking record after record in this situation? Since the Fed was founded in 1913, one US dollar has lost 97% of its purchasing power when we adjust for inflation. 1 ounce of gold, which was $18.92 in 1913, has gone up to $1,700 in 2020, which corresponds to a real gain figure of 95%. This is a very clear example of living in a system of unlimited money versus limited assets. With the transition to the unlimited monetary system right after the 1980s, growth, stock markets, inflation, etc., everything turned into a complete lie. Well, do you believe these lies? Because they do everything in their power to make you believe them. Well-paid economists who work for this system sit in ivory towers, establishing fancy technical economic concepts the average person has a difficult time wrapping their minds around. They intend to show you that economics is their business because they don't want the public to understand what they're going on about. Besides, Most people spend their days in front of cable TV, not even aware of what's happening. When you try to warn your loved ones, I know they sometimes accuse you of fantasy and exaggeration. The Fed does the same. This is nothing new to them. It's normal for them to spread their economic falsehoods, but we can see through it. And that is why we prepare ourselves accordingly with limited assets. It's not just the United States, but the whole world clinging to these economic lies. For example, in Japan, which is supposedly one of the most developed economies in the world, the Bank of Japan became Japan's largest shareholder with a $434 billion hoard. The US dollar is steadily hitting the ground day by day. The Fed's answer to those like me who gave examples such as the impending destructive inflation, even the Weimar Germany hyperinflation, is that we are talking in vain, that we're in a fantasy world, and our leader and his genius team also have a great plan, printing trillions of dollars into the system. Most Americans are unaware that they've become addicted to stimulus checks, and they seem happy with this situation. They will soon find that the current stimulus checks are not going to improve the economy or meet their standard of living, but by then it'll be too late. Other countries that can see the American dollar slipping away are aware that the transition to a different currency is necessary, and they're already preparing accordingly. I will explain this in detail in future videos. Moreover, when we look at the history of fiat system collapses, we see that inflation or hyperinflation are the cause. Propelled by unlimited money printing, it's not difficult to see that we're on the same path. It's worth mentioning the rising gas prices all over the US, which are expected to massively increase in the coming months. It's one of the things that can directly affect prices across the board. This is one of the first alarm signals of inflation. And I'm not even talking about the gas you put in your personal vehicle. You know that the products in the supply chain don't come to your local shops or supermarkets on foot, they have to get there somehow. Gasoline prices have been rising for 10 weeks in a row. Since last month, the national average has increased by 33.2 cents. Diesel is now $3.07 a gallon and has risen 7 cents in the last week. One of the signs that will accelerate the process I mentioned in my previous real estate housing market crash video is the enormous increase in lumber prices. Since last spring, the price of lumber has gone up by more than 180%. These high prices have the potential to stall new construction projects and raise new home prices. The average price of a new home in the United States has gone up by more than $24,000 since April 2020, according to the National Association of Home Builders. Why? Wood has gone up. The lumber and gas situation doesn't apply to everything, but we are seeing more and more signs of inflation. Some persistently continue to defend the lies of the unlimited money system. In fact, developments are taking place that will begin to permanently affect the living standards of many Americans. According to a Rand Corporation report covering the years 1975 to 2018, the period of economic lies and limitless money experience, $45 trillion were stolen almost silently from our pockets. As described in the report, this amount was taken from 90% of the people and transferred to 10% of the people somehow over the years. The realization of inflation and perhaps its transformation into hyperinflation, along with the American dollar ceasing to be the world reserve currency, means more than just higher poverty. It means our living standards would plummet, and prices everywhere would skyrocket. This could lead to a great social uprising. This is why so many Americans bought guns in record numbers over the last year, and the surge is continuing. According to Small Arms Analytics, a consulting firm in South Carolina, almost 25 million guns were purchased in 2020. There was a 68% increase in firearm background checks in Georgia, with 904,035 new applications. Background checks in Michigan this January were 155% higher than in 2020, and in New Jersey they were 240% higher. Americans of different social backgrounds and economic situations are preparing for what to do if worst comes to worst and they have to protect themselves and their families. Here on The Financial Argument and other YouTube channels that tell the real truth, we can reach people more easily on social media platforms so they can learn about what is really happening without manipulation, fancy economic jargon, and misleading news. We know what stories they try to spin, but they cannot make us believe their lies. Thank you for your support here on YouTube and Patreon, and your wonderful comments that show you're aware of everything. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to keep the YouTube algorithm alive so that we can reach other people who are not prepared. God bless you all.